I know you personally through social media, and I met you through Instagram.
Yeah.
But yeah, who are you, and what brought you to the digital space initially?
Yeah. So my name is Jasper. My full name is Jasper Ivan Iturriaga. So you roll the R. You just blame the Spaniards for that last name. And many people have struggled spelling my name. But anyways, so my name is Jasper. I used to be a pastor in Indonesia. That's basically what my work is. And then I decided to leave my work as a pastor to pursue my passion in photography and video and filmmaking. But currently I've been living out of a suitcase for the past 4 years, traveling around the world, doing all these ministries. I'm doing itinerant speaking, but at the same time I do a lot of photography and video. But currently I'm stuck here in California because of the Rona. I'm supposed to fly out for an expedition in Nepal, but then all the borders are closed, and then currently I'm stuck here in California. So that's what I currently do, being stuck here. Try to still do a lot of media ministry and social media stuff, but yeah, just currently out here trying to survive here in California.
Yeah, so you mentioned, just kind of like winding it back, you mentioned that you were a pastor. Was that something that you went full steam ahead, this is what I want to do, or did you kind of get roped into it? What was the story there?
Yeah, so my pastoral ministry, I never really decided for myself to be a pastor. I was forced to be a pastor. I woke up one time when I was 17 years old, and this was fast forwarding. Woke up one time in the hospital, and then the doctor came up and said, you have a severe seizure, and they had an MRI scan on my brain, and they found a tumor in the left side of my brain. And so they said, oh, you have a tumor, this is scary, so we need to take care of you and all that kind of stuff. A few weeks later, or a few months later, my father came up and he said, Jasper, I think God is calling you to be a pastor. Now, if you have an Asian parent, you don't really have a choice. And so I said, sure, let's do it. And so I did not like the idea, but I had to do it. And so I was sent to the boarding school. And by the grace of God, I found Jesus there. Not because I was searching for him, but because God organized and orchestrated people or events for me to know him more and to know him deeper. There's a quote from the book Ministry of Healing that I could resonate the most, when Ellen White said, grace is an attribute given to undeserving human beings. We do not seek for grace, but grace was sent in search for us. And I felt like I could resonate that to that so much, because I was not seeking for God at all, but God found me instead. And so fast forward, I graduated my theology, and then I was sent to Indonesia to help start a school. It's called Amazing Facts Center of Evangelism in Indonesia. Became an evangelist there for a few years. Then I was sent to Jakarta International Seventh-day Adventist Church, where I became a pastor for around 2 to 3 years, and that's where my pastoral ministry began. From then on, I left pastoral work and do this kind of work.
Yeah. How did you kind of break it to your Asian parent that ministry was going to look a little bit different going forward? Was that a struggle for you? Or?
It was never really. I think the whole issue for them is that how do you sustain yourself? Because when I was doing ministry, I have a sustainable salary, but now I literally don't have any salary anymore. Right, so everyone's like, "Hey, what are you gonna do?" Sorry, this is not Rona, but just
you can't catch a Rona video.
But anyways, they were anxious about, hey, how are you gonna provide for yourself? But ministry-wise, they still know I'm preaching every single week or every single Sabbath. Even until now, I speak every single week, and so ministry is still the same. It's much busier. But it's technically the same. It's just they're just anxious about, hey, where are you gonna get money? So
yeah. And what do you think was like, you switched from rocking up and like doing like full-on pastoral ministry with the church and that type of thing? What was the key thing that you went, oh, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to be doing ministry differently?
Yeah, well, I'm not downgrading pastoral ministry. And I think there's room for pastoral ministry, but I felt like God does not call me to do that. I'm not called to sustain a church. You know, I'm called to advance into something for me that I'm passionate about. And I was never really into sustaining a church or church board meetings. I was never into that. That's not my grind. And so I felt like, you know what? I'd rather be broke and do the things that I love than be paid and be miserable. And so I followed my stoke, and I believe that you should follow what God has called you to do. And so I left pastoral ministry, and so far I'm really broke, you know, but that's what I've said. I'm broke, but stoked about life.
I'm gonna say that. I just feel like we need a hashtag follow your stoke as a way of like encouraging people to just follow what God has deeply, you know, impressed them to do. And that's really like an interesting thing, like you saying you definitely weren't called to board meetings. I don't think anyone would say they feel called to board meetings, but it's just, I mean, it's a passionate, energetic space. I will give you that in some churches. I've experienced it, but in seeing that you didn't want to do that, obviously, like now we know you as somebody who is a photographer and a videographer and jet setting around the world. Was there a clear point at which you kind of picked up a camera, or you were fiddling around with something online and you just went, wow, this is like what I want to do? Or did you start photography earlier in life?
When I was 11 years old, or about 12, my grandma has this camera, and she would tell me, hey, Jasper, every time you're in the Philippines, there's a lot of festivities, birthdays, or like town festivals or whatever it is. And my grandma would say, hey, can you film it? And I would actually fall in love doing filmmaking and all that kind of stuff. But then I kind of lost it because growing up, I was really addicted to video games. And so I kind of lose that talent. And many of us are like that. Sometimes God has called us in certain things, and Satan gives us something not necessarily evil, but distracts us to the very calling that God wants us to do, you know? And a friend of mine once said, the enemy of best is good. And so sometimes God offers you something good, not necessarily evil, but distracts you from your calling. And so I fell in love doing that. Then I lost it. Then when I was in Indonesia, I got a hold of a camera. I bought a camera, and then I just this feeling, nostalgic feeling of falling in love doing photography again was brought back to me. And so I started doing photography and all that. During that time, I never had any mentor. I only have YouTube. And I studied, and then I realized, man, I want to do this. You know, I wanted to do this. So that's where it really started.
Yeah, you've pointed out that, and I want to make this really clear to people. I think a lot of us are going through this journey, and it sounds like you went through it a lot earlier, where you made the point of, yes, there are good things that we can do, but sometimes they're not the best thing. There's a book that I'm reading, and it's not my Bible, but it clearly articulates things that the Bible itself points out, and it's called Essentialism. And essentially the idea is that we've got all these things in our lives, and they're all good things, but they're not necessarily the right thing to be doing with our time. And the greatest example is the fact that Jesus could have healed every single person that was hurting. But he didn't. He did, you know, he healed certain people, and in the great scheme of things, that was the right thing for him to be doing. And so you've hit an important nail on the head there, and I want to encourage people that are tuning into this to really spend time before just diving into digital ministry, if that's where you're passionate, to think, God, what is the right thing for me to be doing with this? Do I just haphazardly share stuff, or do I really focus on what you've given me passion for? So that's really cool. So you left, what was your first kind of gig, or you know, where was the first place that you went and suddenly decided, okay, I'm going to be doing video, or I'm going to be doing photography and make a mission out of this?
I think it's really started just watching YouTube at first, because when I was a pastor, I started to, like, there was a time where, you know, what do Google will show if I type in my name? So I type in my name in Google, and I found out that there's actually some sermons that a lot of sermons that was filmed when I was 22 years old or something like that, preaching in Indonesia. And it was in a very old camera and all that kind of stuff. So I started to go and watch all these videos. And one of the videos that I have got 300,000 views, 200,000 views. And I said, man, there's a lot of people actually watching these stuff, right? And I'm like, and so I started to research about the population in social media, how many people are actually active in social media, how many times a day they use social media. And I said, man, this could be like a mission field. And I start to ask myself, is it a mission field, or, because we're living in a generation where it seems like, and few years ago, the church really hates social media. And when I talk about hate social media, I hear a lot of preachers just saying, hey, instead of lighting a candle, we try to curse the darkness instead. So we love to do that a lot. We curse the darkness instead of lighting a candle. And I said, man, I should start doing some things. And so during this time, I'm making videos and all that here and there. These are not professional videos. I'm just trying to make something. And I went to this place in the Philippines, beautiful place called El Nido. So I made videos just flying my drone and all that kind of stuff. And then I posted it on Facebook with a Bible verse at the end. And then it got almost 1.5 million views. And I said, man, this is crazy, because this could be a great ministry. And that's where it actually started. I was like, man, I could reach a lot of people. I should do something like this. So every time we have programs in the church, or I do mission trips, I would make videos and start to make this as a ministry. So I think that's where it really started.
And that's something, I've noticed about your posts over the years, is that you don't necessarily, you're not preaching a sermon, although that's something that you do, but you've got pictures of like touristic destinations and not so touristic destinations, and you're simply pointing out with your skill set the beauty of the world, the beauty of people, and then kind of like tapping on like a Bible verse or reflection at the end of it. And that's something that I would really encourage people to do. Sometimes it's not about hitting the 28 fundamentals out through your social media page. It's more so just demonstrating the viewpoint that we have of the creation, in the same way that you, Jasper, have done, can sometimes allow people to see the world that they live in with a totally different set of eyes. Did you have encouragement from the church? Did you feel like, because you mentioned that the church thought, well, there was an attitude, I guess, of it's evil, it's dark, don't go there. How did you find encouragement with other people?
I wanted to be honest, right? I think I did not feel like I have support in terms of media ministry. There are some people who support me, but as a church, they don't seem to go and think of that direction. And I say this respectfully. Most of the time, we as a church, we're stuck in that evangelistic mode. If there's no baptism, it doesn't count, and all that kind of stuff. And then I was reading the Spirit of Prophecy, and I don't know, it always talks about methods. And she said, God never ordained a certain method, right? Method always changes. One method is never ordained. And so I've realized that not because evangelistic meetings and canvassing work has worked a few years before, that does not mean that it needs to work and we need to stick on that. And again, some of these work, right? But it's not the only way, and that's not the only method that God ordained. And so I've never really have, even now, the way we treat creatives in the church, we don't really treat them well. Most of them are considered volunteer, doing it for Christ. Many of them are not paid. And so the way we look at creatives now, that we are not really supported, but it's, if you wait for the church to support you, you'll never start a ministry. If you wait for funds and then you say, if the church funds me, as soon as I get funds from people, you'll never start a ministry. You need to, the Bible always talks about this. even when you conquer lands, in the Old Testament, God's people, or God will always tell his people, if you put the soles of your feet in the land is yours, right? Just if God has called you to do that, put the soles of your feet in the land, and the land is yours. Do not wait for providence. I've never really felt support from the church as a whole, but amen, whatever. If you don't want to support, this is what God has called me to do. I'm going to help the church with it, with or without the church's support.
Mm. And when you say, I mean, it's an area of growth, I think, as well. There's the church as a whole, is, you know, as an institution, is learning how do we support this better? How do we step out of like fear-based human mindset and really, you know, just get the work done in essence. But it seems as though you've had a lot of, you've had a lot of floors or couches to sleep on. You've had different ministries to be involved with. What are some different, because I know you do stuff on your own, but what are some ministries that, as you said, they've just put their foot out on the land and they're going ahead and doing it? Who are some notable or I guess impressionable ministries that you are involved with at the moment?
I think one of the best examples, Lineage Journey. Like that ministry, it was never, I mean, we got a little support from the church, but it was just started by a group of people who says, man, with or without the church's support, we're going to do this. Right. And so we just went. I flew to Europe and spent 4 months in Europe just to finish this ministry. We were never paid. 3 seasons now. We are never paid a single penny. But God provides. We finished season 1, season 2. Now we're under season 3. But Lineage Journey started with just a vision. No support at all. Just a vision. Hey, let's do this. I'll fly to Europe. I've never met these people. I like the vision. Let's start something. And now we got almost 4 million views and a lot of people interacting in social media, and it's a really good ministry. If you haven't seen this, Lineage Journey, it's a good ministry. And that started with an initiative of, you know what, let's just do it.
And that's an important point to make, that it's not just yourself, Jasper, that's like, I'm going to do this and this is me and I'm working this on my own. You've got like a team, and it's not just a team of creatives. It's like, it seems as though it's a family to you. Would you say that that's yeah? And for people that don't know, I mean, Adam Ramden, who is kind of like the face, I guess, of Lineage Journey, is to my knowledge, unless he's changed, the youth director of the North England Conference. And so, and an experience, because that was where I became a Christian, meeting him and seeing the way that he supports people. He's a very generous person with his time, and just like very family oriented. And when I say family, I mean like Jasper is a part of the family, and the others that are involved are a part of the family. And I think what I want to share or suggest with people as well is that think of the people that you minister with as family, because that's essentially what we are in a great church sense. And it's hard to believe that we have like 20 or so million brothers and sisters, but on a smaller scale level, if you're doing ministry, you don't have to do it alone.
There's always people. God will always send people.
And an example of, as you said, you know, you've stepped out of like a safe salary, so to speak, and yet here you are today without really, you know, bumps and bruises or anything. Maybe perhaps if you fell off something massive, like, I know, the what are they, pyramids of Giza, but you seem to be taken care of. Would you say that's been your consistent?
I mean, I've always tell young people, it's just, if it's God's will, it's always God's will. And so I've never been hungry. I've never been in a situation where I need money or I wanted something. The Lord always provided. There's always a house that would take care of me. 50 countries, there's always someone who would take care of not only my needs, but actually like a roof, a place to stay. It's almost like I call it a faith trip, right? It's by faith, and as I travel, the Lord always provides. And I always tell young people, if that is God's desire, He will always provide. He always provide. I've never been in a situation where oh man, I'm afraid because I don't have any money or whatever. God always provides. In 50 countries, God always provides.
Yeah, and just to make the point as well, it's not, especially for you, Jasper, coming from the Philippines, I imagine the freedom to travel anywhere with visas can
Oh,
be
it's
quite
difficult.
difficult as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't have an American passport or whatever passport is first world. So my passport is very third world. I'm from the Philippines. So I'm always check how much money you have in your bank account. And I have always have to apply for a visa, wait for this and that. It's difficult. So to travel in 50 countries, it's it is a struggle, but it's possible with God, right? It's always a miracle. I've always, you see if you follow me on Instagram, and you've seen I've traveled quite a lot, and even though with my very weak passport.
Yeah, yeah. It just means that you're a citizen of the kingdom essentially, and God's like,
Yeah.
if I want to send you somewhere, I'm going to send you somewhere. And I think, you have been blessed, or I guess impressed in a sense, to have this mission where you're actually traveling around the world. And some people might resonate with that, and some people might be feeling as though that's what they're called to do, which is beautiful encouragement to have you as an example. You mentioned something a little bit earlier, and it was about the fact that when you were looking initially into researching this, the efficacy of doing online ministry, you had a look at the online population. And that is, the biggest country in the world is the internet, from what I understand. How do you, I know there's questions here. There's a question here that asks the question. There's a whole lot of the word question in that sentence. How do your photos jumpstart an evangelistic conversation? So initially answer that, but I have a follow-up question for that as well.
It does not need to be an evangelist conversation. And I always tell people are not projects. And when I say that, I say that because when I was a pastor, it's all about how do I convert these people? You're not here to do that. You're not here to consider people as projects. You're here to actually to consider people as humans. You when Jesus was here on this earth, he was just having conversation, not in a concept of converting people, but to actually be with them. The Bible says, Emmanuel, God with us. That's the main purpose of Jesus. It's all about withing. He's eating with people. He's with people. And you see that throughout the Bible. And the reason why sometimes we go into, and I would say this respectfully, we fail a lot. And I've noticed this in my ministry, because whenever I see a soul, automatically, all I think about is, how do I bring this person to church? That is not what you're called to do. Right? You're called to be with people. There's a famous quote in the book Ministry of Healing that says, Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. By mingling with men, and Jesus mingled with men as one who desired their good, and he met their needs, won their confidence, and lastly, he said, and then he called them, follow me. The last conversation is about asking people to follow God. The first conversation is, how can I connect to this person? Regardless of if he's accept my religion or not, how do I connect to them? So I'll give you a classic example. There's a social media, this is recorded, so I may be in trouble, but there's a social media girl that I met in social media, a lot of followers. And she just messaged me and she said, why are you so happy, and why are you post so peaceful? Whenever I see your post, you're so peaceful. I'm a social media influencer. There's a lot of things that I do. I'm happy, but I'm not peaceful. I'm not content. Can you tell me what's your secret and all that? And that led into a conversation, and that led into just being a friend. And then all of a sudden I realized that we're now eating lunch together, and now we're friends. And tomorrow, actually, we have both of us will have a sort of a Q&A about mental health and the Christian perspective of mental health tomorrow. And she has like 200,000 followers or something. And how am I able to do that if I was like was like, hey, but let me tell you about the Sabbath though. You know, it's because instead of building bridges, we try to burn bridges by putting things that could divide us. And these are very important, but these are not necessarily things that we should have conversation with while on social media. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. You will notice, and I'm trying to say this without being specific as well. I write for a number, anonymously for a number of different things, both Christian and not necessarily Adventist, but, you know, non-denominational, or not non-denominational as a denomination, but just Christian. And one thing that makes me really cringe is that I have carefully thought out a word of encouragement and a word of peace, and I've been personally impressed by something in the scripture, and so I share it. And this is just on social media. And then the first thing that happens is I notice people starting to somehow have divisive conversations. And that's, you know, when we're sharing something that is so beautiful, whether or not it be, you know, specifically talking about anything Christianese, like anything with Christian language, so to speak. It's sometimes scary in the online space to see people who said, you know, social media is evil, then go on there. And we have to be so careful that how we speak, especially with text, without the sound of tone, without being able to see each other's faces, and without the deep desire to love that person and just be with them, as you were mentioning, that we don't end up kind of doing the opposite and pushing people away from the very thing that will essentially give them peace. And so, you know, the question that person asked earlier of, well, how do I start an evangelistic conversation? The question I ask is, you know, what is an evangelistic conversation? Because when we show people love, from my understanding and from Christ's example, that is the ultimate evangelistic act, even though it doesn't need to be like, okay, I'm going to show this person love so that we get another baptism in the bank. But yeah, I guess the question I have is, I'm noticing, and I think this is positive, that a lot of people are stepping back from just posting Bible verses and, you know, spirit of prophecy quotes on their thing, and they're actually having genuine mingling conversations with people online. What do you have any, you know, tips or tricks on how you essentially went in that direction?
I don't shy away from my Bible verses or my own like quotes. I've always posted it, but I've always put it in a way where my friends will it be relevant to them? There's sometimes this was long back, you know, I would post whatever and very Adventist stuff and all that kind of stuff. But I realized that if it's relevant, no matter who wrote it, as long as that is relevant during this time, encouragements, words about depression and how to overcome loneliness and all that, it always is very relevant. As long as these words are not divisive. The whole problem with social media is that when you quote something like, for example, oh, the mark of the beast is coming, right? Period. That's it. It does not help at all. Like the Sabbath is Saturday. Period. That's it. It does not help at all. So it needs to be a conversation where it meets people where they are, and it does not build a wall. It doesn't burn bridges.
It's really interesting.
Social media is a way to connect. That's supposed to be what it is all about. And so for me, I realized that I will not post anything divisive. That separates me from like a doctrine or a certain belief that we believe solely. I try not to put that in social media. And don't get me wrong, I do a lot of Bible studies, and I only say that on my Bible studies, but not in public.
Yeah. And I mean, a pure example, I mean, the Bible itself doesn't say the mark of the beast is coming. Like it presents that message, but in a whole lot of symbolism, a whole lot of visual context, And it really presents it in a way that those that actually are searching for that information will find it, rather than, you know, kind of being like slap in the face. If that makes sense.
And this is the principles that I have learned. And if you forget everything, I'll tell you, don't forget this one. Information without relationship is intimidation. And I've learned that in my ministry. Relationship without, information without relationship is intimidation. And we, as a church, have intimidated a lot of people because we've never built that relationship. Oh, here's a glow track. Oh, here's a great controversy for you. Oh, read this. Oh, read that, without building that relationship. Oh, here's a quote. Oh, here's a Bible verse about the Sabbath and Sunday is wrong. Oh, here's what's wrong and here's what's right. If you don't not build that relationship, you cannot reach people. There's no evangelistic way to reach people if you have not built that relationship. If you look at the way Jesus speaks, it's always relationship based. That's why the publicans accepted him, the prostitutes accepted him, because he has built that relationship. And when the truth comes and it needs to be said, people are not offended. They accept him because they know this guy loves them, right? And so that's what ministry is all about. I guess the whole problem is that we love an easier fix, and we love, oh, after 10 days, this person needs to be baptized, you know? So when you consider people as projects, then you get frustrated because why are they not baptized? And you put a time limit to a decision, you know? And so I've realized that's not what God has called us to do. God has called us to build a relationship with people.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've kind of journeyed through that transition. Maybe I will use the word conversion from like a place. I know growing up for me, I was surrounded by a lot of people who, I will use the term legalistic, and I think that's accurate. And on the other end of it, people that were just totally like uninterested at the same time in what we call winning souls for Christ, which is comes across as quite competitive when you use the word winning. But so did you find yourself originally kind of being in that place of just like, yes, I follow the narrative of evangelism and that kind of thing, and then suddenly had your own realization when people were no longer projects to you, they were people?
Yeah. I actually learned that this year. My whole concept as a pastor is to always bring people to church. Like, what can I do to bring people to the church? And so when the church stopped during the quarantine and the Rona, I was like, man, what do we do? Everything is closed. And I have found a group of friends in Loma Linda, and they decided, you know what? Instead of bringing people to the church, let's bring the church to the people, right? And so we have a lot of homeless friends here in Loma Linda, outside in San Bernardino. We decided, you know what? Let's go out to the streets every single day. I'm not talking about a Sabbath thing. I'm talking about every single day. We go out in the streets. We try to feed people. And we realize this, right? We're not just here to feed people. We're here to feed the same people every single day. So we feed 100 to 120 people every day. The same people, same place. They know us, and we come to them. We know their names, and we're not there to convert people. And we're just there. By the way, the ministry is called Fusion. We're there to actually be with people, like to listen to them, right? And so we went out, we go on, and then the past 3 weeks, we realized, man, we can't just be feeding a lot of people like this because we don't have any time to talk to them. So we decided, you know what? We're going to cut our place short. We're just going to visit 2 sites, and we'll eat with people. One person will eat with people for 15, 20 minutes. So as soon as we hand them food, we'll eat with them too. And we'll actually talk to them. And for the past 4 months, if I'm not mistaken, 4 months of the Rona season, we baptized 6 people. And we've never asked people to be baptized. We've never asked them. They come to us and say, I want to be part of your church. Can you give us a Bible study? And so we would give them Bible studies and they get baptized because they saw something different. And that is not because we keep the Sabbath, not because we have a different doctrine, but because we are the only people, we are the only church. And this is what they told us. Jasper, so many churches will come to us. Actually, we just want to let you know that we don't need food here. There's already 4 or 5 churches will come every day, give us food. But you know what's different? Only you guys will come and talk to us. Only you guys would see us and actually listen to us. That's what makes a difference. And it was there. I said, man, that's crazy. That's changed my perspective, because it's all about bringing people to the church. Oh, whenever I post something, it needs to target a certain people to convert them. But I realized that's not what God has called us to do. God has called us to be different. We are loving people. Yeah, we need to dwell with people, not considering them as projects, but people. And so from then on, we almost every week we have one person baptized. And this week, I'm not sure if tomorrow we get baptism or not, but we're still Bible studying this guy, but maybe next week. But we have people getting baptized just because of that concept. It works. Building relationships. And that has been a theme on my social medias a lot.
Yeah, and I've personally seen, for those of you who are listening or like listening back later, Jasper has his own personal Instagram. You have a couple, I think. Well, there's different kind of ministries that you're a part of that you assist with. So do you want to list those for us? I'm going to write them in the comments as well so people can kind of look them up.
My main Instagram is just PSTR Jasper. That's a code name, Pastor Jasper. So that's what I do. My main Instagram, or you can follow me on Facebook. But that's currently what and if you follow Fusion San Bernardino, you can type it in on Instagram, Fusion San Bernardino. So you see a lot of pictures there. We just talk to people. Yeah, just building relationship. That's what we do, building relationship. I was posting this when we were in Arizona. I was walking with this kid, and he came to us to join feeding the homeless, and he saw this guy without shoes, and he was like, man, it's so hot. It's like 45, 46 degrees Celsius. And I was like, so hot. And why do you don't have any shoes, man? And I was like, and he was like, you know what? Let me give you my shoes. And so Caleb, my friend, gave his shoes to him. And I saw this. And I was like, man, that's crazy. And I posted this and I said, I preached 2 sermons that day. And my favorite sermon was Caleb's sermon. He did not speak in the pulpit, but he preached a much more powerful sermon that I preached. And that is acting the love of Jesus. And this is what the world needs. The world needs is not just a sermon, but actually action. And you can do this in social media a lot.
Yeah. I've got a tricky question for you. So I know God says to do our good deeds he speaks of doing, in the Bible, doing good deeds in secret. Or at least like just, not going like as the Pharisees do and being like, look at all the amazing things I'm doing. And I wouldn't say that that's what you do, but how do you make a distinction? Because for instance, I now follow Caleb on Instagram and I love to hear what he's doing. And I'm one of those people that when somebody's doing something, even if it's a friend, whether they be Christian or not, like I tag them in my stories or whatever, just to kind of affirm and bring light to the fact that God loves them. But how do we draw that line between showing off our ministry online and actually showing the ministry for the purpose of the gospel?
I guess that question is it's a hard issue, because you might be following a certain method. No one knows my heart. So I might tell you I'm honest and I'm genuinely just want to show people what we're doing. But you don't know, my heart might be very prideful and I would just want to show people and show off people my ministry. No one knows about this except me or you. So that is a tricky question in a sense that no one really knows my heart and your heart. So I've seen a lot of people post a lot of things, and I'm not in a position to say whether they have a genuine motive or not, because who knows, really? Who knows? And so if to answer the question, I don't know. You don't know my motive. I don't know your motive. So it's only up to God, really, if what's inside our heart. Yeah, and it's a continual search. And I'll be honest with you, there will be time where it's all about your pride. It's all about, and this is why you continually ask the Lord. Say, Lord, please, in whatever ministry, by the way, it's not just homeless feeding. It might be preaching, it might be social media, whatever it is. So is there a guideline to it? Maybe, yeah, but it all boils down to the person's heart.
That's right. I was kind of a trick question, but it's good. It's good for us. I think what I wanted to raise it is because it's good for us to think when we're stepping into these spaces, unlike it's essentially it's necessary right now in a lot of ways for us to be online. Church is the face of the church, or the face of Jesus, and how we interact with people online is essentially one of the main places where people are meeting. And I stress this kind of every week when I discuss things with people, but it's good to kind of, I guess, self-reflect and be like, whoa, did I share that? Am I enjoying the amount of response that this is getting for me, or am I enjoying being a part of this response because I'm seeing God working in the life? And it's an incredible thing just to witness and to know that out of his grace and mercy, he's positioned me to serve his kingdom.
Yeah.
So I always want to encourage people to kind of think of that. And there are times where I have moments of like, I don't, my social media and my Instagram, which is probably where I do mainly the ministry I do, ends up being a lot of stuff in the DMs, like the direct messages. So private conversation, which is great. And the anonymous nature of that, I struggle with that word, it reminds me a lot of when Nicodemus comes to Jesus. And I'm not saying that I'm Jesus, right? But what I am saying is that he witnessed Jesus for a while. He witnessed how Jesus interacted with people online. He witnessed what Jesus had to say about things in parables, like, right? Jesus wasn't like the mark of the beast. He would say things in different contexts to different people in different ways. And then Nicodemus comes in like in the dead of night, essentially, like, and opens up and asks questions more deeply. And so you have, I'm just looking here, I've just switched over to your Instagram page on my phone.
Hold on 1 minute. Yeah.
All good. You have...
I'm just adjusting my lighting.
Around 9,000 followers. Do you deem that to be a lot? Because not to compare you at all, but the last person I spoke to last week has about 60,000 people. Very different ministry, but do you find that that's a reflection of anything in particular, of any work that you've done with your Instagram account?
I don't know. I don't measure success in the amount of followers I get. Yeah. I measure my success in the amount of interaction I have. So you might have 1 million people. If you have not have any conversation or links to people's heart, then it doesn't matter. And so I am not sure. I'm really targeting 10,000 this year, so I could have a swipe up button. That's all I am asking for. But I don't see followers or views as an indicator of success. It's all about connection. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with my followers because I really have interaction with them. Most of them are from different parts of the world, non-SDAs, and I actually talk to people. And so you can have 1 million subscribers if you don't have interaction to real people and real needs, then you might be asking yourself, why am I here?
And when we sent out the email for people to register for this, I just took a kind of a screenshot of your like the Instagram layout. All of your photos essentially are landscapes, beautiful landscapes, pictures. Sometimes you or like couple photos from a distance and that kind of thing, which is a beautiful ministry in and of itself. I'm sure you would have some stories to share there. But a very clear indication is that there's nothing specifically religious about what you post. And I know you mentioned that earlier. Alicia had a question. She said she enjoys photography as well. How does she incorporate into a daily social media post so that she can make a statement for Jesus? I think you've kind of already tapped on that. Maybe sometimes, I don't know if you'd agree, but sometimes I find that a statement for Jesus is just going, hey, I'm here, I'm present for you guys. And
yeah,
a photo can be simply a way of doing that.
Yeah, and for me, I personally do not use my post as a way to really reach out to people and show that I'm a Christian or whatever. Again, that's what you said. It all comes to personal messages. That's where most of my interaction comes. Prayer comes there, you know, all these things. And I'm really surprised how the Lord orchestrates the way for me, you know. It was never intentional, you know, but it's just, it goes out to be successful in terms of like DMs and personal messages.
Yeah. I have an example just to touch on that, Alicia. The way that I actually came across Jasper was through, it was a post, I think I was following Revelation of Hope, so Taj Paklev and the team that travel around with that series, and you had been traveling with them, and they'd shared one of your posts, and it was, I know you mentioned this sometimes, my friend actually pointed out that you mentioned this, the photo of a whale and her baby. And I was really touched to see how, I don't know if you want to tell the story or if I'll tell it. But
go for it.
Yeah, okay, cool. So a couple of years ago, my mother was diagnosed with metastatic cancer, and she's a pilot, so she flies. She owned and flew a float plane in a beautiful area in New South Wales, Australia. And the best part of the season for flying was when the whales were coming up and down the coast. So they would go up the coast first on their own, and then they'd come back with babies. And the last day before she had to give up flying because she was entering into chemo treatment, and they ground you, so you're not allowed to fly in the same way that you wouldn't be able to drive if you just had an operation. She witnessed a mother whale, and she's kind of, gliding, or I don't know what's, swimming along, and she's got a little baby whale beside her, and the baby whale starts to sink. And so the mother whale comes kind of like underneath and lifts the baby whale up. And some people know, not many people obviously through this would know, that my mum brought my family into the Adventist church, but then left. And so she's always had this struggle with religion, but that was God's way of essentially saying to her, kind of like the Bible verse that talks about, bringing you up again, like a mother eagle brings like the baby eagle up when they're first taking flight. It was God's way of saying to her, I'm gonna keep you afloat, essentially. And she was really touched by that. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, I'm scrolling through Instagram almost aimlessly because I was, a self-professed social media addict. And I came across this photo that Jasper, I wish I could see if I can share it on the screen, but yeah, you posted it, and it was the similar Instagram. Oh, there you are. Similar photo. And that was the biggest, when I shared this photo with my mother, I'm gonna have to zoom so far back to find this. She was just beside herself because the timing was incredible. But I've since heard that actually resonated with you quite a bit.
Yeah, and these it was not intentional at all. I just posted it, and then you messaged me that it spoke to your mom and spoke to you, or a promise. It's a picture of a baby whale being helped by the mom to go out and breathe, and then he'd learn how to swim. So technically, Ruth says that it was a promise by God that he would do the same. So this is the photo. There you go. It's my dream shot. There you go. It took me 6 days to find the shot.
Yeah.
So the baby well would be held by the mom. And so Ruth says that her mom says that it was a promise. It's almost like she was, she's in cancer and she was drowning, and soon God will help her to breathe back up to the surface.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if your comment is there.
I think I actually direct messaged you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But because I actually asked for a print of it so that I could so I could get it printed and put it up against my mum's like nightstand. And since then, like a couple of years later, she did pass away, and so I have the picture now in my living room, just as a reminder when I walk past in the morning that, hey, sometimes you're gonna feel like a blubbery fat baby whale that can't get up in the morning. And so essentially it was not just a way that God spoke through you to touch the heart of my mum, but now, as a Christian, as we mingle as Christians, as brothers and sisters on the online social world, like that's impacted my life. But it's just an example of how something so simple as that, something as simple as just taking a photo of nature and taking it and seeing the beauty in it, allow somebody else who's a total stranger to really feel God's voice speaking to them. You did not use any words. You just simply showed God's creation at a beautiful moment. But yeah, I remember a friend of mine actually said, "Oh, this person's just talking about you." In I think you were sharing like a digital ministry thing for GC or something like that. But yeah, I want to encourage people that sometimes, Alicia, you ask a question or somebody else asks the question, how do I make a statement for Jesus? Just show up. Being present in the online space, I think, is a statement for Jesus. And Jasper, you're from what you've shared, and yes, you've been blessed and challenged at times to be somebody that's a digital nomad and traveling and sleeping on on the benches at airport terminals and things like that. But you've also made, hopefully I would say in a healthy way, online your home. Yeah. Are there times that you've struggled with the sheer amount of time that you sometimes have to spend online? Have you ever had to?
Yeah, it's a struggle. If the devil can make you bad, he'll make you busy. And I guess that social media is one of those places where it's almost like a trap too, so you make sure that your devotion is good. You make sure that you're connected before you get in. It's a vacuum out there, man. It's and again, there should be a balance where, we should use social media, but at the same time, we should be careful at the same time not to be consumed by so much social media. And I do struggle about it a lot. And so, it's you need to be careful. Am I in social media intentionally to be with people, or am I just here to pass time and to waste time? And so again, we should not judge something by its abuse. And yes, people have abused social media to the point that they no longer have connection with God. But at the same time, we need to be, mindful. We really need to be mindful.
I mean, an example of that, if we were to judge marriage by the prevalence of abuse in marriage, then we would deem marriage as an unholy and unsacred thing. Yet God deems it to be the exact opposite from the get-go. And whether we like it or not, sometimes like people are meeting online. That's where their heartbreak is being shared. That's where they're going when they feel a sense of emptiness. And like the Samaritan woman at the well, Jesus shows up there, even though he shouldn't have really needed to travel. Jews essentially would always travel around Samaria. That's where he was tuning into that space. And so, and now we have a beautiful story to learn from, and the story of how the disciples didn't really use that space effectively. On the flip side, they just went there to enjoy the city and then to leave. But yeah, it's a really good point. Just to reiterate the importance of us having like a healthy relationship with how we're entering into these spaces, because Jasper, you don't make your bread or win your bread in a way, but you are just, it seems as though you're always provided with opportunities, and people somehow fund your ability to end up in a place rather than giving you money for you to decide how you want to use that money. Yeah, so I just have one, I guess, last question before we wrap up. We've kind of touched on the challenges of digital ministry, and I think that was, having faith to just step into that space, knowing how to approach it with a healthy mindset, knowing how to not put up barriers and rather create space for people. You've got a visitor, which is really awesome, just behind you.
Grandma.
Hey.
Say hi. Grandma. Say hi.
Hi.
There you go. She's walking around.
Yeah, living a best life.
Yeah.
Do you have any encouragement for people who maybe in the position of you thinking, the Rona time, as you put it, is pretty hard time to be traveling. But if there are those of us that are feeling impressed to travel and live nomadically, what are some encouragement? What are some, pressing words or advice you would give them?
I would always say start with what you have. Whatever, there's someone who asked the question, I don't know where it is now. It's like, how do I start something? I don't even have followers and all that. It's all about being faithful with what you have. The Bible says those who are faithful in that which is least will be faithful in that which is much. And so if you're faithful to whatever God gives you now, and Ellen White emphasized this a lot. She said, the Lord will increase. God will give an increase of light to those who are faithful to the light received. So whatever God is giving you light today, it doesn't need to be much. It doesn't need to be big. Whatever it is, if you're faithful with it, God says, I will give you more. So what I've learned in this ministry is this: faithfulness equals to opportunities. If you are faithful, whatever it is that you do, it may be cooking, it may be whatever. It does not need to be social media. It doesn't need photography or video. You just need to be faithful with whatever you have. God says, I will give you more. That's a promise. Test God. Whatever you have right now, it may be a notebook. It may be Moses started with his staff. God says, look, use your staff, throw it, and become a snake, right? So it's not really the argument of resources. In the Bible, you will never hear God talks about, oh, you lack resources. Wait till the resources come. No, never once in the Bible it talks about resources. Resources always come. The whole debate in the Bible about when people are called is their availability. Are you available to do this? Yeah. And I'll challenge you, find any stories in the Bible that starts with if you're rich, you go out, or you have money, whatever. No. It always starts with availability. So if you're available, if you're faithful, that's where God starts, right? And God, you need to give God a place to start, man. And that is to be faithful with what you have. So that I would encourage you to do that. Don't wait for the camera equipment to whatever equipment to come. Be available. And then I promise you, you'll flourish. God will flourish, whatever God has called you to do. That's what I've learned personally.
I think people will notice that I tend to, when it comes to these training things, I really want to touch on the spiritual reasons why we're doing these, and having that faith background. We can talk about how to take the perfect photo. We can talk about how to raise Instagram followers. The way in which you've done that genuinely and in a sustainable way is clearly by having, intentional conversations with people. And I think that a lot of people go, well, how do I do this? How do I do this? And I think first stepping back, as we are doing, and saying, well, why are we doing this? And how are we measuring success, and why is this important? And less so, what resources, as you said, do we need? Because God will just literally in some way or another dump them on your table and say, here it is. And I know a lot of examples, that's happened for you in a lot of ways. Even though you've also lost resources like cameras to waves in Iceland, which is a funny story. Probably not at the time, but I just want to encourage people in that sense to really, if we're entering into the online space and we're just like, I just want to do all these things and I need the resources and this kind of stuff, but we're not entering into this prayerfully and with a reflection of God has genuinely called me. And I think he's called everyone who has the capacity to access the internet to somehow bless the internet space in some way. But just to reflect on the why and the conviction that God, his Spirit is putting in our hearts as well.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you just for these conversations each week, tend to be quite organic. And we do, touch on certain points, but in a lot of ways, it seems that you've bared your heart. And I want to thank you for that, Jasper, because this is essentially like an official, I don't know if you were aware, I hope I mentioned it, but it does get published on behalf of the Adventist Church. And our church is really learning I'm noticing in a very humble way how to better this. And sometimes that voice comes from a small person like, David, for instance, with his stones. He's in the background. He was the last thought of in the family, and yet he was the one that slayed the giant. And each of us have a voice in the church. Each of us have the Holy Spirit speaking to us if we allow him to, and each of us have a part to play in making our church just like a body of different body parts and different functions to serve the beautiful purpose of sharing love and light with the world. And so, Jasper, you've been doing this today. There are those that have tuned in and those that will listen back later that have also in the past and will continue to do this. And just as we leave, do you have any final thoughts, words? I know you've just mentioned this before, but anything that, what camera should we be looking out for?
I think that's my main takeaway. Just be faithful with what you have. Whatever God has given you now, be faithful with it. And I promise you, God is faithful. So do not ask about resources. It will come. Ask yourself, am I available for God's call? And to be faithful with it. And if it's God's will, it's always God's will, and he will provide for you. One thing I've learned about the ministry is that if you wait for the most convenient time, that time will never come. And so if you're waiting for that time to get into what God has called you to do, it may be in social media, whatever. And if you wait for that time to be convenient, it will never come. Now is the time. Start with what you have. And my classic example, this is me. If I can do this, I'm start photography with my cell phone, with a GoPro, and then slowly get into cameras. In a year and a half, I'm a featured photographer in National Geographic 5 times. And it's not because I was very talented or whatever, but because I said, Lord, if God has called me, I'll be faithful with it. And so if I could do it, I'm sure God will bless you too. And so I'm an average Joe. I never had any mentor. I never went to school for this, but I was just faithful with what I have. And if I can do it through God's grace, you can do it too.
Yeah. For those who are tuning in, I might actually follow up, Jasper, after this video with just maybe like some of your go-to YouTube channels for learning these skills, because that's something, as you said, that you did do. I'm just reminded of, the idea that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We don't necessarily trade with cattle on the online space. We don't actually use those as tools, but he does own the Canons in 1,000 camera stores. So just think of it that way, that God is like the owner of everything on this planet. He can provide anything that he deems we need, as long as we ask for him to be the provider for that. Jasper, you seem to be slowly and genuinely, as you learn to minister to others, you're allowing the Holy Spirit to really minister to yourself. And I'm noticing you just seem so at peace with what God's teaching you in this journey. And that's the most important thing when we take away from all the ministry we're doing for other people, for us to also allow God to be speaking through the same medium as well, and speaking through His Holy Spirit and refining our characters so that we can continue to just be beacons of love and light. So thank you so much, Jasper. Thank you for those that tuned in and sent in the questions. Wherever you are right now, it is 12 here in Australia, and so I'm going to go grab some lunch, and it's going to be incredible. Self-professed. But wherever you are, thank you for tuning in. I know some people are tuning in from ungodly hours, even though this is for a very godly purpose. So we thank you for joining. And as I said, all resources, all the links to what we've spoken about are going to be available in the video when it's uploaded on YouTube. So stay tuned for that as well.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Jasper. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Ciao.